Good morning. It's 9:16 on the 3rd of September 2024. And welcome to Titania's Realm at Sacred Space. Beautiful morning this morning. I've not long been up and I'm going to do a sneaky bit more of reading The Last Unicorn from Peter Beagle to you, because there's quite a bit to go and I'm inspired, and I've got to leave, just after midday to go and get my hair done. So I thought I'll crack out another video and we'll forge ahead with more interesting, fun, erudite, life-affirming, soul-nourishing stories. So we got cut off by iPhone storage last evening. I was actually getting a bit tired anyway, but I was going to forge ahead and make it a 3-hour video, but the gods decreed and my iPhone storage decreed blip, blap, blup, nop, nup, noop, nup, and niet, and off it went. So, and it was very annoying, because when I'm in my zone, I just want to keep going and anyway, the gods decreed what they decreed. I think I've cleared my storage for now. So here we go again, babies, my beautiful people of planet Earth. So we got cut off where in chapter 4, page 70, where it said, the unicorn looked away, but it sort of was mid-paragraph, so I'll start from the beginning of that paragraph again, just for cohesion and clarity, although it probably makes no difference where I start, but I'll just backtrack that one sentence. The Fane, oh dear goddess, let me start that again. The rain faded as he spoke. The sky began to clear, and the wet grass glowed like the inside of a seashell. The unicorn looked away, searching through a fog of kings for one king, and through a snowy glitter of castles and palaces for one built on the shoulders of a bull. No one has ever travelled with me, she said, but then no one ever caged me before, or took me for a white mare, or disguised me as myself. Many things seem determined to happen to me for the first time, and your company will surely not be the strangest of them, nor the last. Just put an eraser, please. I've got a million of them, but when I want one, can you find it? No. Dear goddess. Because I thought I penciled in that line that the unicorn looked away in pencil, but it's actually in blue coloured pencil, which is not cool. And I don't like to desecrate my books. It's one of the things I'm very, very passionate about, keeping my books pristine. I was a school librarian in high school for a while, so I got all these rigid, almost bordering on Asperger's ideas, which is funny because I'm not actually an Aspie, but no reflection on Aspies, but you know how they can be very, very rigid? Well, I kind of get a bit like that sometimes. I have to remind myself to flow, go with the flow, go with the flow. So now where were we? So you may come with me if you like, says the unicorn to Schmendrick the magician. Oh dear goddess, now I've made a mess here. Oh, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it? Well, I'm not fully synapsing, people of Earth. I'm not quite fully awake. I've been awake since 8:30, but it can take me a while to integrate. Just saying, it's why I shame it. I walk between worlds most of the time. Sometimes I'm here, sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm everywhere. You know how it is. Anyway, here we go. So I'll repeat that sentence. So you may come with me if you like, though I wish you had asked me for some other reward. Schmendrick smiled sadly. I thought about it. He looked at his fingers, and the unicorn saw the half-moon marks where the bars had bitten him. But you could never have granted my true wish. There it is, the unicorn thought, feeling the first spidery touch of sorrow on the inside of her skin. That is how it will be to travel with a mortal all the time. No, she replied, I cannot turn you into something you are not, no more than the witch could. I cannot turn you into a true magician. I didn't think so, Schmendrick said. It's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm not worrying about it, the unicorn said. A blue jay swooped low over them on that first day of their journey, said, Well, I'll be a squab under glass, and flapped straight home to tell his wife about it. She was sitting on the nest, singing to their children in a dreary drone. Spiders and sow-bugs and beetles and crickets, slugs from the roses and ticks from the thickets, grasshoppers, snails and a quail's egg or two, all to be regurgitated for you. Lullaby, swindles and schemes, flying's not near as much fun as it seems. Saw a unicorn today, the blue jay said as he lit. You didn't see any supper, I notice, his wife replied coldly. I hate a man who talks with his mouth empty. Baby, a unicorn. The jay abandoned his casual air and hopped up and down on the branch. I haven't seen one of those since the time. You've never seen one, she said. This is me, remember? I know what you've seen in your life and what you haven't. The jay paid no attention. There was a strange-looking party in black with her, he rattled. They were going over Cat Mountain. I wonder if they were heading for Haggard's country. He cocked his head to the artistic angle that had first won his wife. What a vision for old Haggard's breakfast, he marvelled. A unicorn coming to call, bold as you please, rat-tat-tat on his dismal door. I'd give anything to see. I suppose the two of you didn't spend the whole day watching unicorns, his wife interrupted with a click of her beak. At least I understand that she used to be considered quite imaginative in matters of spare time. She advanced on him, her neck feathers ruffling. Honey, I haven't seen her, the blue jay began, and his wife knew that he hadn't and wouldn't dare, but she battered him one anyway. She was one woman who knew what to do with a slight moral edge. The unicorn and the magician walked through the spring over soft Cat Mountain and down into a violet valley where apple trees grew. Beyond the valley were low hills as fat and docile as sheep, lowering their heads to sniff at the unicorn and wonder as she moved among them. After these came the slower heights of summer and the baked plains where the air hung shiny as candy. Together, she and Schmendrick forded rivers, scrambled up and down brambly banks and bluffs, and wandered in woods that reminded the unicorn of her home, though they could never resemble it, having known time. So has my forest now, she thought, but she told herself that it did not matter, that all would be as before when she returned. At night, while Schmendrick slept the sleep of a hungry, footsore magician, the unicorn crouched awake, waiting to see the vast form of the Red Bull come charging out of the moon. At times, she caught what she was sure was his smell, a dark, sly reek easing through the night, reaching out to find her. Then she would spring to her feet with a cold cry of readiness, only to find 2 or 3 deer gazing at her from a respectful distance. Deer love and envy unicorns. Once a buck in his second summer, prodded forward by his giggling friends, came quite close to her and mumbled without meeting her eyes, "You are very beautiful. You are just as beautiful as our mothers said." The unicorn looked silently back at him, knowing that he expected no answer from her. The other deer snickered and whispered, "Go on, go on." Then the buck raised his head and cried out swiftly and joyously, "But I know someone more beautiful than you." He wheeled and dashed away in the moonlight, and his friends followed him. The unicorn lay down again. Now and then in their journey, they came to a village, and there Schmendrick would introduce himself as a wandering wizard, offering, as he cried in the streets, to sing for my supper, to bother you just a little bit, to trouble your sleep ever so slightly, and pass on. Few were the towns where he was not invited to stable his beautiful white mare and stay the night, and before the children went to bed, he would perform in the market square by lantern light. He never actually attempted any greater magic than making dolls talk or turning soap into sweets, and even this trifling sorcery sometimes slipped from his hands. But the children liked him, and their parents were kindly with supper, and the summer evenings were lithe and soft. Ages after, the unicorn still remembered the strange chocolate stable smell and Schmendrick's shadow dancing on walls and doors and chimneys in the leaping light. In the mornings they went on their way, Schmendrick's pockets full of bread and cheese and oranges, and the unicorn pacing beside him, sea white in the sun, sea green in the dark of the trees. His tricks were forgotten before he was out of sight, but his white mare troubled the nights of many a villager, and there were women who woke weeping from dreams of her. One evening they stopped in a plump, comfortable town where even the beggars had double chins. And the mice waddled. Schmendrick was immediately asked to dinner with the mayor and several of the rounder councilmen, and the unicorn, unrecognised as always, was turned loose in a pasture where the grass grew sweet as milk. Dinner was served outdoors at a table in the square, for the night was warm and the mayor was pleased to show off his guest. It was an excellent dinner. During the meal, Schmendrick told stories of his life as an errant enchanter, filling it with kings and dragons and noble ladies. He was not lying, merely organising events more sensibly, and so his tales had a taste of truth even to the canny councilmen. Not only they, but all manner of folk passing in the street leaned forward to understand the nature of the spell that opened all locks, if properly applied. And there was not a one but lost a breath at sight of the marks on the magician's fingers. Souvenir of my encounter with a harpy, Schmendrick explained calmly. They bite. And were you never afraid? A young girl wondered softly. The mayor made a shooing noise at her, but Schmendrick lit a cigar and smiled at her through the smoke. Fear and hunger have kept me young, he replied. He looked around the circle of dozing, rumbling councilmen and winked widely at the girl. The mayor was not offended. It's true, he sighed, caressing his dinner with linked fingers. We do lead a good life here, or if we don't, I don't know anything about it. I sometimes think that a little fear, a little hunger might be good for us, sharpen our souls, so to speak. That's why we always welcome strangers with tales to tell and songs to sing. They broaden our outlook, set us to looking inward. He yawned and stretched himself, gurgling. One of the councilmen suddenly remarked, My word, look at the pasture. Heavy heads turned on nodding necks, and all saw the villagers' cows and sheep and horses clustered at the far end of the field, staring at the magician's white mare, who was placidly cropping the cool grass. No animal made a noise. Even the pigs and geese were as silent as ghosts. A crow called once, far away, and his cry drifted through the sunset like a single cinder. Remarkable, the mayor murmured. Most remarkable. Yes, isn't she? The magician agreed. If I were to tell you some of the offers I've had for her. The interesting thing, said the councilman, who had spoken first, is that they don't seem to be afraid of her. They have an air of awe, as though they were doing her some sort of reverence. They see what you have forgotten how to see. Schmendrick had drunk his share of red wine, and the young girl was staring at him with eyes both sweeter and shallower than the unicorn's eyes. He thumped his glass on the table and told the smiling mayor, She is a rarer creature than you dare to dream. She is a myth, a memory, a will-o'-the-wish, wail-o'-the-wisp. If you remembered, if you hungered. His voice was lost in a gust of hoofbeats and the clamour of children. A dozen horsemen, dressed in autumn rags, came galloping into the square, howling and laughing, scattering the townsfolk like marbles. They formed a line and clattered around the square, knocking over whatever came in their way and shrieking incomprehensible brags and challenges, to no one in particular. One rider rose up in his saddle, bent his bow and shot the weathercock off the church spire. Another snatched up Schmendrick's hat, jammed it on his own head and rode on, roaring. Some swung screaming children to their saddlebows, and others contented themselves with wineskins and sandwiches. Their eyes gleamed madly in their shaggy faces, and their laughter was like drums. The round mare stood fast until he caught the eye of the raiders' leader. Then he raised one eyebrow. The man snapped his fingers. I know, I can't. I just can't. I don't know why. You have to laugh. It's a gift that keeps giving, isn't it? Then he raised one eyebrow. The man snapped his fingers, and immediately the horses were still, and the ragged man as silent as the village animals before the unicorn. They put the children gently on the ground and gave back most of the wineskins. "Jack Jingly, if you please," the mayor said calmly. The leader of the horsemen dismounted and walked slowly toward the table where the councilmen and their guest had dined. He was a huge man, nearly 7 feet tall, and at every step he rang and jangled because of the rings and bells and bracelets that were sewn to his patched jerkin. "Evening, Your Honour," he said in a gruff chuckle. "Let's get the business over with," the mayor told him. "I don't see why you can't come riding in quietly like civilised people." The boys don't mean no harm, Your Honour," the giant grumbled good-naturedly. "Cooped up in the green wood all day, they need a little relaxing, a little catharsis like. Well, to it, eh?" With a sigh, he took a wizened bag of coins from his waist and placed it in the mayor's open hand. "There you be, Your Honour," said Jack Jingly. "It bean't much, but we can't spare no more than that." The mayor poured the coins into his palm and pushed at them with a fat finger, grunting. "It certainly isn't much," he complained. "It isn't even as much as last month's take, and that was shrivelled enough. You're a woeful lot of freebooters, you are." "It's hard times," Jack Jingly answered sullenly. "We bean't to blame if travellers have no more gold than we. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, you know." "I can," the mayor said. He scowled savagely and shook his fist at the giant outlaw. "And if you're holding out on me," he shouted, "if you're feathering your own pockets at my expense, I'll squeeze you, my friend. I'll squeeze you to pulp and peel and let the wind take you. Be off now and tell it to your tattered captain. Away, villains." As Jack Jingly turned away, muttering, Schmendrick cleared his throat and said hesitantly, "I'll have my hat, if you don't mind." The giant stared at him out of bloodshot buffalo eyes, saying nothing. "My hat," Schmendrick requested in a firmer voice. "One of your men took my hat, and it would be wise for him to return it." "Wise, is it?" granted Jack Jingly at last. "And who be you, pray, that knows what wisdom is?" The wine was still leaping in Schmendrick's own eyes. "I am Schmendrick, the magician, and I make a bad enemy," he declared. "I am older than I look and less amiable. My hat." Jack Jingly regarded him a few moments longer. Then he walked back to his horse, stepped over it and sat down in the saddle. He rode forward until he was hardly a beard's thickness from the waiting Schmendrick. "Nah, then," he boomed, "if you be a magician, do summat tricksy. Turn my nose green, fill my saddlebags with snow, disappear my beard. Show me some magic, or show me your heels." He pulled a rusty dagger from his belt and dangled it by the point, whistling maliciously. "The magician is my guest," the mayor warned, but Schmendrick said solemnly, "Very well, on your head be it," making sure with the edge of his eye that the young girl was watching him. He pointed at the Scarecrow crew, grinning behind their leader, and said something that rhymed. Instantly, his black hat snatched itself from the fingers of the man who held it and floated slowly through the darkening air, silent as an owl. Two women fainted and the mayor sat down. The outlaws cried out in children's voices. Down the length of the square sailed the black hat, as far as a horse trough where it dipped low and scooped itself full of water. Then, almost invisible in the shadows, it came drifting back, apparently aiming straight for the unwashed head of Jack Jingley. He covered himself with his hands, muttering, "Nah, nah, call it off," and even his own men snickered in anticipation. Schmendrick smiled triumphantly and snapped his fingers to hasten the hat. But as it neared the outlaw leader, the hat's flight began to curve, gradually at first, and then much more sharply as it bent toward the councilman's table. The mayor had just time to lunge to his feet before the hat settled itself comfortably on his head. Schmendrick ducked in time, but a couple of the closer councilmen were slightly splattered. In the roar of laughter, varyingly voluntary, that went up, Jack Jingley leaned from his horse and swept up Schmendrick the magician, who was trying to dry the spluttering mare with the tablecloth. "I misdoubt ye'll be asked for encores," the giant bellowed in his ear. "You'd best come with us." He threw Schmendrick face down across his saddle bow and galloped away, followed by his shabby cohorts. Their snorts and belches and guffaws lingered in the square long after the sound of hoofs had died away. Men came running to ask the mayor if they should pursue to rescue the magician, but he shook his wet head, saying, "I hardly think it will be necessary. If our guest is the man he claims to be, he should be able to take care of himself quite well. And if he isn't, why then, an impostor taking advantage of our hospitality has no claim on us for assistance. No, never mind about him." Creeks were running down his jowls to join the brooks of his neck and the river of his shirt front, but he turned his placid gaze toward the pasture where the magician's white mare glimmered in the darkness. She was trotting back and forth before the fence, making no sound. The mayor said softly, "I think it might be well to take good care of our departed friend's mount, since he evidently prized her so highly." He sent 2 men to the pasture with instructions to rope the mare and put her in the strongest stall of his own stable. But the men had not yet reached the pasture gate when the white mare jumped the fence and was gone into the night like a falling star. The 2 men stood where they were for a long time, not heeding the mare's commands to come back, and neither ever said, even to the other, why he stared after the magician's mare for so long. But now and then, after that, they laughed with wonder in the middle of very serious events, and so came to be considered frivolous sorts. Chapter 5. All that Schmendrick remembered later of his wild ride with the outlaws was the wind, the saddle's edge, and the laughter of the jingling giant. He was too busy brooding over the ending of his hat trick to notice much else. Too much English, he suggested to himself. Overcompensation. But he shook his head, which was difficult in his position. The magic knows what it wants to do, he thought, bouncing as the horse dashed across a creek. But I never know what it knows, not at the right time anyway. I'd write it in a letter if I knew where it lived. Brush and branches raked his face and owls hooted in his ears. The horses had slowed to a trot and then to a walk. A high, trembling voice called out, "Halt and give the password." "Dammy, here we go," Jack Jingley muttered. He scratched his head with a sound like sawing, raised his voice and answered, "A short life and a merry one, here in the sweet green wood, jolly comrades united, to victory plighted." "Liberty," the thin voice corrected. "To liberty plighted. The I sound makes all the difference." "Thank'ee. To liberty plighted, comrades united." Nah, I said that. "A short life and a merry one, jolly comrades." Nah, that's not it. Jack Jingley scratched his head again and groaned. "To liberty plighted." "Give me a little help, will ya?" "All for one and one for all," the voice said obligingly. "Can you get the rest yourself?" "All for one and one for all." "I haven't," the giant shouted. "All for one and one for all, united we stand, divided we fall." He kicked his horse and started on again. An arrow squealed out of the dark, sliced a wedge from his ear, nicked the horse of the man riding behind him, and skittered away like a bat. The outlaws scattered to the safety of the trees, and Jack Jingley yelled with rage, "Damn your eyes! I gave the password 10 times over. Let me only get my hands on ye." "We changed the password while you were gone, Jack," came the voice of the sentry. "It was too hard to remember." "Ah, you changed the password, did ye?" Jack Jingley dabbed at his bleeding ear with a fold of Schmendrick's cloak. "And how was I to know that, ye brainless, tripeless, liverless git?" "Don't get mad, Jack," the sentry answered soothingly. "You see, it doesn't really matter if you don't know the new password, because it's so simple. You just call like a giraffe. The captain thought of it himself." "Call like a giraffe?" The giant swore till even the horses fidgeted with embarrassment. "Ye ninny, a giraffe makes no sound at all. The captain might as well have us call like a fish or a butterfly." "I know, that way." oh, excuse me. Needed that. I don't know where that came from, but I needed that. That way, where were we? That way nobody can forget the password, even you. Isn't the captain clever? "There's no limit to the man," Jack Jingley said wonderingly. "But see here, what's to keep a ranger or one of the king's men from calling like a giraffe when ye hail him?" "Aha," the sentries chuckled. "That's where the cleverness of it is. You have to give the call 3 times, 2 long and 1 short." Jack Jingley sat silent on his horse, rubbing his ear. 2 long and 1 short, he sighed presently. "Ah well, 'tis no more foolish than the time he'd have no password at all and shot any who answered the challenge. 2 long and 1 short. Right. He rode on through the trees, and his men trailed after him. Voices murmured somewhere ahead, sullen as robbed bees. As they drew nearer, Schmendrick thought he could make out a woman's tone among them. Then his cheek felt firelight, and he looked up. They had halted in the small clearing where another 10 or 12 men sat around a campfire, fretting and grumbling. The air smelled of burned beans. A freckled, red-haired man, dressed in somewhat richer rags than the rest, strode forward to greet them. "Well, Jack," he cried, "who is it you bring us, comrade or captive?" Over his shoulder he called to someone, "Add some more water to the soup, love, there's company." "I don't know what he is myself," Jack Jingly rumbled. He began to tell the story of the mare and the hat, but he had hardly reached the roaring descent upon the town when he was interrupted by a thin thorn of a woman who came pushing through the ring of men to shrill, "I'll not have it, Cully. The soup's no thicker than sweat as it is." She had a pale, bony face with fierce, tawny eyes and hair the colour of dead grass. "And who's this long lout?" she asked, inspecting Schmendrick as though he was something she had found sticking to the sole of her shoes. "He's no townsman. I don't like the look of him. Slit his wizard." She had meant to say either weazened or gizzard, and had said both, but the coincidence trailed down Schmendrick's spine like wet seaweed. He slid off Jack Jingly's horse and stood before the outlaw captain. "I am Schmendrick, the magician," he announced, swirling his cloak with both hands until it billowed feebly. "And are you truly the famous Captain Cully of the Greenwood, boldest of the bold and freest of the free?" A few of the outlaws snickered and the woman groaned. "I knew it," she declared. "Gut him, Cully, from gills to gilt before he does you the way the last one did." But the captain bowed proudly, showing an eddy of baldness on his crown, and answered, "That am I. He who hunts me for my head shall find a fearful foe, but he who seeks me as a friend may find me friend enow. How do you come here, sir?" "On my stomach," said Schmendrick, and unintentionally, but in friendship nonetheless, though your leman doubts it, he added, nodding at the thin woman. She spat on the ground. Captain Cully grinned and laid his arm warily along the woman's sharp shoulders. "Ah, that's only Molly Grew's way," he explained. "She guards me better than I do myself. I am generous and easy to the point of extravagance, perhaps, an open hand to all fugitives from tyranny. That's my motto. It's only natural that Molly should become suspicious, pinched, dour, prematurely old, even a touch tyrannical. The bright balloon needs the knot at one end, Molly? But she's a good heart. A good heart." The woman shrugged herself away from him, but the captain did not turn his head. "You are welcome here, Sir Sorcerer," he told Schmendrick. "Come to the fire and tell us your tale. How do they speak of me in your country? What have you heard of dashing Captain Cully and his band of free men? Have a taco." Schmendrick accepted the place by the fire, graciously declined the gelid morsel, and replied, "I have heard that you are the friend of the helpless and the enemy of the mighty. and that you and your merry men lead a joyous life in the forest, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. I know the tale of how you and Jack Jingley cracked one another's crowns with quarter staves and became brood brothers thereby, and how you saved your Molly from marriage to the rich old man her father had chosen for her. In fact, Schmendrick had never heard of Captain Cully before that very evening, but he had a good grounding in Anglo-Saxon folklore and knew the type. And of course, he hazarded, there was a certain wicked king. Haggard, rotten, ruin him, Cully cried. Aye, there's not one here but's been done wrong by old King Haggard, driven from his rightful land, robbed of his rank and rents, skinned out of his patrimony. They live only for revenge, mark you, magician, and one day Haggard will pay such a reckoning. Somebody should go to war on the Brisbane City Council for giving me a bogus fine, am I right? And the Australian government for skinning me of my matrimony, my grandchildren. But I'll let it go for now, shall I? Yes, mustn't be inspired by the tales of old. But we're nothing without our stories and our truth. A score of shaggy shadows hissed assent, but Molly Grew's laughter fell like hail, rattling and stinging. Mayhap he will, she mocked, but it won't be to such chattering cravens he'll pay it. His castle rots and totters more each day, and his men are too old to stand up in armour, but he'll rule forever for all Captain Cully dares. Schmendrick raised an eyebrow, and Cully flushed radish red. You must understand, he mumbled. King Haggard has this bull. Ah, the red bull, the red bull, Molly hooted. I tell you what, Cully, after all these years in the wood with you, I've come to think the bull's naught but the pet name you give your cowardice. If I hear that fable once more, I'll go down old Haggard myself and know you for a... Enough, Cully roared. Not before strangers. He tugged at his sword, and Molly opened her arms to it, still laughing. Around the fire, greasy hands twiddled dagger hilts, and longbows seemed to string themselves, but Schmendrick spoke up then, seeking to salvage Cully's sinking vanity. He hated family scenes. They sing a ballad of you in my country, he began. I forget just how it goes. Captain Cully spun like a cat ambushing its own tail. Which one? He demanded. I don't know, Schmendrick answered, taken aback. Is there more than one? Aye, indeed, Cully cried, glowing and growing as though pregnant with his pride. Willie Gentle, where is the lad? A lank-haired youth with a lute and pimples shambled up. Sing one of my exploits for the gentleman, Captain Cully ordered him. Sing the one about how you joined my band. I've not seen it since Tuesday last. The minstrel sighed, struck a chord, and began to sing in a wobbly counter tenor. Oh, it was Captain Cully came riding home from slaying of the king's gay deer, when whom should he spy but a pale young man came drooping over the lea. What news, my pretty young man? What ails ye that ye sigh so deep? Is it for the loss of your lady fair, or are ye but scabbard in your griep? I am nae scabbard, whatever that means, and my griep is as well as a griep may be. But I do sigh for my lady fair, whom my 3 brothers ha' riven from me. I am Captain Cully of the sweet green wood, and the men at my call are fierce and free. If I do rescue your lady fair, what service will ye render me? If ye do rescue my lady fair, I will break your nose, you silly old gawk. Gowk. Ye silly old gowk. She wore an emerald at her throat, which my 3 brothers also took. Then the captain is gone to the 3 bold thieves, and he's made his sword baith to shiver and sing. Ye may keep the lass, but I'll hae the stain, for it's fit for the crown of a royal king. Now comes the best part, Cully whispered to Schmendrick. He was bouncing eagerly on his toes, hugging himself. Then it's 3 cloaks off, and it's 3 swords out, and it's 3 swords whistling like the tea. By the faith of my body, says Captain Cully, now ye shall have neither the stain nor she. And he's driven them up, and he's driven them down, and he's driven them to and fro like sheep. Like sheep, Cully breathed. He rocked and hummed and parried 3 swords with his forearm for the remaining 17 stanzas of the song, rapturously oblivious to Molly's mockery and the restlessness of his men. The ballad ended at last, and Schmendrick applauded loudly and earnestly, complimenting Willie Gentle on his right-hand technique. I call it Alanadale picking, the minstrel answered. He would have expounded further, but Cully interrupted him, saying, Good, Willie, good boy, now play the others. He beamed at what Schmendrick hoped was an expression of pleased surprise. I said that there were several songs about me. There are 31 to be exact, though none are in the child collection just at present. His eyes widened suddenly, and he grasped the magician's shoulders. You wouldn't be Mr. Child himself, now would you? He demanded. He often goes seeking ballads, so I've heard, disguised as a plain man. Schmendrick shook his head. No, I'm very sorry, really. The captain sighed and released him. Doesn't matter, he murmured. One always hopes, of course, even now, to be collected, to be verified, annotated, to have variant versions, even to have one's authenticity doubted. Well, never mind. Sing the other songs, Willie lad. You'll need the practice one day when you're field recorded. The outlaws grumbled and scuffed, kicking at stones. A hoarse voice bawled from the safe shadow. Nah, Willie, sing us a true song. Sing us one about Robin Hood. Who said that? Cully's loosened sword clacked in its sheath as he turned from side to side. His face suddenly seemed as pale and weary as a used lemon drop. I did, said Molly Grew, who hadn't. The men are bored with ballads of your bravery, Captain Darling, even if you did write them all yourself. Cully winced and stole a side glance at Schmendrick. They can still be folk songs, can't they, Mr. Child? He asked in a low, worried voice. After all, I'm not Mr. Child, Schmendrick said. Really, I'm not. I mean, you can't leave epic events to the people. They get everything wrong. An ageing rogue in tattered velvet now slunk forward. Captain, if we're to have folk songs, and I suppose we must, then we feel they ought to be true songs about real outlaws, not this lying life we live. No offence, Captain, but we're really not very merry when all's said. I'm merry 24 hours a day, Dick Fancy, Cully said coldly. That is a fact. But we don't steal from the rich and give to the poor, Dick Fancy hurried on. We steal from the poor because they can't fight back, most of them, and the rich take from us because they could wipe us out in a day. We don't rob the fat, greedy mayor on the highway. We pay him tribute every month to leave us alone. We never carry off proud bishops and keep them prisoner in the wood, feasting and entertaining them because Molly hasn't got any good dishes, and besides, we just wouldn't be very stimulating company for a bishop. When we go to the fair in disguise, we never win at the archery or at single stick. We do get some nice compliments on our disguises, but no more than that. I sent a tapestry to the judging once, Molly remembered. It came in fifth, a night at vigil. Everyone was doing vigils that year. Suddenly she was scrubbing her eyes with horny knuckles. Damn you, Cully. What? He yelled in exasperation. Is it my fault you didn't keep up with your weaving? Once you had your man, you let all your accomplishments go. You don't sew or sing anymore. You haven't illuminated a manuscript in years. And what happened to that viola da gamba I got you? He turned to Schmendrick. We might as well be married the way she's gone to seed. The magician nodded fractionally and looked away. As for righting wrongs and fighting for civil liberties, that sort of thing, Dick Fancy said, it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, I'm not the crusader type myself. Some are and some aren't. But then we have to sing those songs about wearing Lincoln green and aiding the oppressed. We don't, Cully. We turn them in for a reward, and those songs are just embarrassing. That's all, and there's the truth of it. Captain Cully folded his arms, ignoring the outlaw's snarls of agreement. Sing the songs, Willie. I'll not. The minstrel would not raise a hand to touch his lute. And you never fought my brothers for any stone, Cully. You wrote them in a letter which you didn't sign. Cully drew back his arm, and blades blinked among the men as though someone had blown on a heap of coals. At this point, Schmendrick stepped forward again, smiling urgently. If I may offer an alternative, he suggested, why not let your guest earn his night's lodging by amusing you? I can neither sing nor play, but I have my own accomplishments, and you may not have seen their like. Jack Jingley agreed immediately, saying, Aye, Cully, a magician. 'Twould be a rare treat for the lads. Molly Grew grumbled some savage generalization about wizards as a class, but the men shouted with quick delight, throwing one another into the air. The only reluctance was shown by Captain Cully himself, who protested sadly, Yes, but the songs, Mr. Child must hear the songs. And so I will, Schmendrick assured him. Later. Cully brightened then and cried to his men to give way and make room. They sprawled and squatted in the shadows, watching with sprung grins as Schmendrick began to run through the old flummeries with which he had entertained the country folk at the midnight carnival. It was paltry magic, but he thought it diverting enough for such a crew as Cully's. But he had judged them too easily. They applauded his rings and scarves, his ears full of goldfish and aces, with a proper politeness, but without wonder. Offering no true magic, he drew no magic back from them, and when a spell failed, as when, promising to turn a duck into a duke for them to rob, he produced a handful of duke cherries, he was clapped just as kindly and vacantly as though he had succeeded. They were a perfect audience. Cully smiled impatiently, and Jack Jingley dozed, but it startled the magician to see the disappointment in Molly Grew's restless eyes. Sudden anger made him laugh. He dropped 7 spinning balls that had been glowing brighter and brighter as he juggled them. On a good evening, he could make them catch fire. Let go all his hated skills and closed his eyes. Do as you will, he whispered to the magic. Do as you will. It sighed through him, beginning somewhere secret, in his shoulder blade, perhaps, or in the marrow of his shin bone. His heart filled and tautened like a sail, and something moved more surely in his body than he ever had. It spoke with his voice commanding. Weak with power, he sank to his knees and waited to be Schmendrick again. I wonder what I did. I did something. He opened his eyes. Most of the outlaws were chuckling and tapping their temples, glad of the chance to mock him. Captain Cully had risen, anxious to pronounce that part of the entertainment ended. Then Molly Grew cried out in a soft, shaking voice, and all turned to see what she saw. A man came walking into the clearing. He was dressed in green, but for a brown jerkin and a slanting brown cap with a woodcock's feather in it. He was very tall, too tall for a living man. The great bow slung over his shoulder looked as long as Jack Jingley, and his arrows would have made spears or staves for Captain Cully. Taking no notice at all of the still shabby forms by the fire, he strode through the night and vanished with no sound of breath or footfall. After him came others, one at a time or two together, some conversing, some laughing, but none making any sound. All carried longbows, and all wore green, save one who came clad in scarlet to his toes, and another gowned in a friar's brown habit, his feet in sandals, and his enormous belly contained by a rope belt. One played a lute and sang silently as he walked. Allan a Dale, it was raw Willie Gentle. Look at those changes. His voice was as naked as a baby bird. Effortlessly proud, graceful as giraffes, even the tallest among them, a kind-eyed blunderbore. The bowmen moved across the clearing. Last, hand in hand, came a man and a woman. Their faces were as beautiful as though they had never known fear. The woman's heavy hair shone with a secret, like a cloud that hides the moon. "Oh," said Molly Grew, "Marion." "Robin Hood is a myth," Captain Cully said nervously. "A classic example of the heroic folk figures synthesized out of need. John Henry is another. Men have to have heroes, but no man can ever be as big as the need, and so a legend grows around a grain of truth, like a pearl. Not that it isn't a remarkable trick, of course. It was the seedy dandy Dick Fancy who moved first. All the figures but the last two had passed into the darkness when he rushed after them, calling hoarsely, "Robin, Robin, Mr. Hood, sir, wait for me." Neither the man nor the woman turned, but every man of Cully's band, saving only Jack Jingley and the captain himself, ran to the clearing's edge, tripping and trampling one another, kicking the fire so that the clearing churned with shadows. "Robin," they shouted, and "Marion, Scarlet, Little John, come back, come back." Schmendrick began to laugh, tenderly and helplessly. Over their voices, Captain Cully screamed, "Fools, fools and children! It was a lie like all magic. There is no such person as Robin Hood." But the outlaws, wild with loss, went crashing into the woods after the shining archers, stumbling over logs, falling through thorn bushes, wailing hungrily as they ran. Only Molly Grew stopped and looked back. Her face was burning white. "Nay, Cully, you have it backward," she called to him. "There's no such a person as you or me or any of us. Robin and Marion are real, and we are the legend." Then she ran on, crying, "Wait, wait," like the others, leaving Captain Cully and Jack Jingley to stand in the trampled firelight and listen to the magician's laughter. Schmendrick hardly noticed when they sprang on him and seized his arms, nor did he flinch when Cully pricked his ribs with a dagger, hissing, "That was a dangerous diversion, Mr. Child, and rude as well. You could have said you didn't want to hear the songs." The dagger twitched deeper. Far away he heard Jack Jingley growl, "He's na child, Cully, nor is he any journeyman wizard neither. I know him now. He's Haggard's son, the Prince Lear, as foul as his father and doubtless handy with the black arts. Hold your hand, Captain. He's no good to us dead." Cully's voice drooped. "Are you sure, Jack? He seemed such a pleasant fellow." "Pleasant fool, you mean? Aye, Lear has that air, I've heard tell. He plays the gormless innocent, but he's the devil for deception. The way he gave out to be this child cove, just to let you off your guard." "I wasn't off my guard, Jack," Cully protested. "Not for a moment. I may have seemed to be, but I'm very deceptive myself." And the way he called up Robin Hood to fill the lads with longing and turn them against you. Ah, but he gave himself away that time, and now he'll bide with us, though his father sent the Red Bull to free him. Cully caught his breath at that, but the giant stretched around it. Schmendrick giggled gently all time that night and bore him to a great tree where he bound him with his face to the trunk and his arms stretched around it. Schmendrick giggled gently all through the operation and made matters easier by hugging the tree as fondly as a new bride. "There," Jack Jingley said at last, "do ye guard him the night, Cully, whiles I sleep, and in the morning it's me to old Haggard to see what his boy's worth to him. Happen we'll all be gentlemen of leisure in a month's time." "What of the men?" Cully asked worriedly. "Will they come back, do you think?" The giant yawned and turned away. "They'll be back by morning, sad and sneezing, and you'll have to be easy with them for a bit. They'll be back, for they am not the sort to trade something for nothing, and no more am I. Robin Hood might have stayed for us if we were. Good night to ye, Captain." There was no sound when he was gone but crickets and Schmendrick's soft chuckling to the tree. The fire faded and Cully turned in circles, sighing as each ember went out. Finally, he sat down on a stump and addressed the captive magician. "Haggard's son you may be," he mused, "and not the collector child as you claim. But whoever you are, you know very well that Robin Hood is the fable and I am the reality. No ballads will accumulate around my name unless I write them myself. No children will read of my adventures in their school books and play at being me after school. And when the professors prowl through the old tales and scholars sift the old songs to learn if Robin Hood ever truly lived, they will never, never find my name, not till they crack the world for the grain of its heart. But you know, and therefore I am going to sing you the songs of Captain Cully. He was a good, gay rascal who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. In their gratitude, the people made up these simple verses about him, whereupon he sang them all, including the one that Willie Gentle had sung for Schmendrick. He paused often to comment on the varying rhythm patterns, the assonantal rhymes, and the modal melodies. I'm getting a bit dry, so we're going to go and make a cup of tea, and we're going to go perhaps sit out and continue reading with Charlie, because I have to keep an eye on the time because I do have to go to my hairdresser, and I go there once every 8 weeks, to get spruced up. I don't know why I feckin' bother, quite fair. I'm an old lady. No one feckin' cares, but, you got to do what you got to do for the sake of vanity, am I right? So, anyway, I do enjoy very much seeing my hairdresser. Oh, I've just noticed. How did that crack? It's all cracked by the gods. Don't even know how that broke. I haven't bashed down hard on it. Oh, well, anyway. What's the time now? 10:28. So about another hour we've got. We've got another hour, I would say, perhaps an hour and a half. But my throat's getting very dry and raspy. Here's our Charlie, enjoying the sunshine. Being a bird, am I right? Being a birdie. It's a glorious day. I must say I'm a bit tired, but I'm a high-functioning nudnik. So, yes. What are you doing, Charlie? You being a good girl? Have you had visitors from the wild birds? I'm sure you have. I'm still laughing about this big fat kookaburra that sat on the hill's hoist above my head and whacked a piece of chicken that I'd given to the birds. He was perched above my head, spitting it all down over my head like a rain cloud of meat. It was like quite astonishing. Then we were eyeball to eyeball and we really connected, that bird and I. Those birds in my garden love me because I always leave them fresh water and give them little bits and tidbits when I have them, and not all the time, but just little treats when I have scraps, because, you know, why not? Waste not, want not, and they enjoy it. And they literally talk to me in like body language and, you know, kind of a weird kind of telepathy at times. It's just delightful. I live here like Snow White at the foot of the forest. It's quite delightful. But anyway, it helps to live in Titania's realm, doesn't it? Away with the pixies. Alright, we might read one more chapter and then knock it off for today, because I'm feeling a bit dizzy and tired now, and it's a process, this recalibrating with the CPAP. It's knocking me around still. But I had not too bad a night last night. I only got up to pee 3 times last night, whereas the night before I was up 5. And that's really debilitating, having to get out of bed, go and pee, crawl back into bed, fall back asleep, get back to sleep, put the mask back on, settle back to sleep, and then sort of an hour or 2 you're off again. I mean, it's bollocks, isn't it? Bollocks, innit, as the English would say. Not that I'm English, I'm actually a New Zealander. But I was raised by a lot of English people being around me, and I do have English ancestry. And so there is that. Well, let us continue with our story, my darlings. Our beautiful story. I have to find somewhere shady to sit. I wanted to sit with Charlie, but it's too thick and hot out here. Look at the bright sun. But everything's set up for the lawnmower man, but he didn't come. He did not come. I find that very annoying when that happens. We'll bring Charlie in and we'll go back to the lounge. I think it's more comfortable where we were. Yes, I was going to come out and read to you out here, Charlie, but I think it's too scathing hot. Come to Mama. Say hello to the people. Say hello to the people, Charlie. I know. Say hello to the people, Charlie. Look at the kisses with the Mama. Big, show the people how you give to Mama the big kisses. I know, my kissing girl. You're the only one who gives me kisses nowadays. I know, but that's okay. That's okay. Right, cup of tea time. My goodness, I'm parched. Oh, hello. Are you saying hello to the people, Charlie? You're happy to spend time with your mother. I know. She's very busy, your mother, lately. She's very busy. She's avoiding death by being very, very busy indeed. That's truer than we want to know, to be actually honest. Not that I'm planning on. I'm not dying. For once, I'm not feckin' dying for a change. Isn't that nice? Oh, dear goddess. You kind of have to laugh. Well, here we go, my darlings. We'll continue on. You ready, Charlie? We're reading The Last Unicorn to the beautiful people of Earth. Yes, they could probably read it themselves if they had the book or go to the library. But sometimes it's nice to have stories read to you. She tells herself in her mad egoic strange ways. Right, here we go. Mama. Chapter 6. Captain Cully fell asleep 13 stanzas into the 19th song, and Schmendrick, who had stopped laughing somewhat sooner, promptly set about trying to free himself. You can do a poo, aren't you? He strained against his bonds with all his strength, but they held fast. Jack Jingley had wrapped him in enough rope to rig a small schooner and tied knots the size of skulls. Gently, gently, he counselled himself. No man with the power to summon Robin Hood, indeed to create him, can be bound for long. A word, a wish, and this tree must be an acorn on a branch again. This rope be green in a marsh, for he knew before he called on it that whatever had visited him for a moment was gone again, leaving only an ache where it had been. He felt like an abandoned chrysalis. Do as you will, he said softly. Captain Cully roused at his voice and sang the 14th stanza. There are 50 swords without the house and 50 more within, and I do fear me, Captain, they are like to do us in. Have done, says Captain Cully, and never fear again, for they may be 100 swords, but we are 7 men. I hope you get slaughtered, the magician told him. But Cully was asleep again. Schmendrick attempted a few simple spells for escaping, but he could not use his hands, and he had no more heart for tricks. What happened instead was that the tree fell in love with him and began to murmur fondly of the joy to be found in the eternal embrace of a red oak. Always, always, it sighed, faithfulness beyond any man's deserving. I will keep the colour of your eyes where no other in the world remembers your name. There is no immortality but a tree's love. Indeed. I'm engaged, Schmendrick excused himself, to a western larch since childhood. Marriage by contract, no choice in the matter. Hopeless. Our story is never to be. A gust of fury shook the oak, as though a storm were coming to it alone. Galls and fire blight on her, it whispered savagely. Damned softwood, cursed conifer, deceitful evergreen, she'll never have you. We will perish together, and all trees shall treasure our tragedy. Along his length, Schmendrick could feel the tree heaving like a heart, and he feared that it might actually split in two with rage. The ropes were growing steadily tighter around him, and the night was beginning to turn red and yellow. Red and yellow, Charlie. Oh. He tried to explain to the oak that love was generous precisely because it could never be immortal. And then he tried to yell for Captain Cully, but he could only make a small creaking sound like a tree. She means well, he thought, and gave himself up for loved. The only way to roll babies in the face of grand passions that you can't master or confound. Am I right? I know someone that humours me quite the same way as that tree. Oh! Oh, you have to laugh. Then the ropes went slack as he lunged against them, and he fell to the ground on his back, wriggling for air. The unicorn stood over him, dark as blood in his darkened vision. She touched him with her horn. When he could rise, she turned away, and the magician followed her, wary of the oak, though it was once again as still as any tree that had ever loved. The sky was still black, but it was a watery darkness through which Schmendrick could see the violet dawn swimming. Hard silver clouds were melting, and the sky grew warm. Shadows dulled, sounds lost their shape, and shapes had not yet decided what they were going to be that day. Even the wind wondered about itself. Now I'm hot. Right, where were we, Charlie? We were at the wind wondering about itself, and I've lost my... here we are. Did you see me? He asked the unicorn. Were you watching? Did you see what I made? Yes, she answered. It was true magic. The loss came back, cold and bitter as a sword. It's gone now, he said. I had it. It had me, but it's gone now. I couldn't hold it. The unicorn floated on before him, silent as a feather. Close by, a familiar voice said, Leaving us so early, magician? The men will be sorry they missed you. He turned and saw Molly Grew leaning against a tree, dress and dirty hair tattered alike, bare feet bleeding and beslimed. She gave him a bat's grin. Surprise, she said. It's Maid Marian. Then she saw the unicorn. She neither moved nor spoke, but her tawny eyes were suddenly big with tears. For a long moment she did not move. Then each fist seized a handful of her hem, and she warped her knees into a kind of trembling crouch. Her ankles were crossed and her eyes were lowered, but for all that, it took Schmendrick another moment to realise that Molly Grew was curtsying. He burst out laughing, and Molly sprang up, red from hairline to throat hollow. Where have you been? She cried. Damn you, where have you been? She took a few steps toward Schmendrick, but she was looking beyond him at the unicorn. When she tried to get by, the magician stood in her way. You don't talk like that, he told her, still uncertain that Molly had recognised the unicorn. Don't you know how to behave, woman? You don't curtsy either. But Molly pushed him aside and went up to the unicorn, scolding her as though she were a strayed milk cow. Where have you been? Before the whiteness and the shining horn, Molly shrank to a shrilling beetle, but this time it was the unicorn's old dark eyes that looked down. I am here now, she said at last. Molly laughed with her lips flat. And what good is it to me that you're here now? Where were you 20 years ago, 10 years ago? How dare you? How dare you come to me now when I am this? With a flap of her hand, she summed herself up, barren face, desert eyes, and yellowing heart. I wish you had never come. Why do you come now? The tears began to slide down the sides of her nose. The unicorn made no reply, and Schmendrick said, "She is the last unicorn in the world." She would be, Molly sniffed. It would be the last unicorn in the world that came to Molly Grew. She reached up then to lay her hand on the unicorn's cheek, but both of them flinched a little, and the touch came to rest on the swift, shivering place under the jaw. Molly said, "It's all right. I forgive you." Unicorns are not to be forgiven. The magician felt himself growing giddy with jealousy, not only of the touch, but of something like a secret that was moving between Molly and the unicorn. "Unicorns are for beginnings," he said, "for innocence and purity, for newness. Unicorns are for young girls." Molly was stroking the unicorn's throat as timidly as though she were blind. She dried her grimy tears on the white mane. "You don't know much about unicorns," she said. The sky was jade grey now, and the trees that had been drawn on the dark a moment ago were real trees again, hissing in the dawn wind. Schmendrick said coldly, looking at the unicorn, "We must go." Molly agreed promptly. "Aye, before the men stumble on us and slit your throat for cheating them, the poor lads." She looked over her shoulder. "I had some things I wanted to take, but they don't matter now. I'm ready." Schmendrick barred her way again as he stepped forward. "You can't come with us. We are on a quest." His voice and his eyes were as stern as he could make them, but he could feel his nose being bewildered. He had never been able to discipline his nose. Molly's own face closed like a castle against him, trundling out the guns and slings and cauldrons of boiling lead. "And who are you to say we?" "I'm her guide," the magician said importantly. The unicorn made a soft, wondering sound, like a cat calling her kittens. Molly laughed aloud and made it back. "You don't know much about unicorns," she repeated. "She's letting you travel with her, though I can't think why, but she has no need of you. She doesn't need me either, heaven knows, but she'll take me too. Ask her." The unicorn made the soft sound again, and the castle of Molly's face lowered the drawbridge and threw wide even its deepest keep. "Ask her," she said. Schmendrick knew the unicorn's answer by the sinking in his heart. He meant to be wise, but then his envy and emptiness hurt him, and he heard himself cry out sadly, "Never! I forbid it! I, Schmendrick, the magician." His voice darkened, and even his nose grew menacing. Be wary of rousing a wizard's wrath, rousing. If I chose to turn you into a frog, I should laugh myself sick, said Molly Grew pleasantly. You're handy with fairy tales, but you can't turn cream into butter. Her eyes gleamed with a sudden, mean understanding. Have sense, man, she said. What were you going to do with the last unicorn in the world? Keep her in a cage? The magician turned away to keep Molly from seeing his face. He did not look directly at the unicorn, but stole small sights of her as stealthily as though he could be made to put them back. White and secret, morning-horned, she regarded him with piercing gentleness, but he could not touch her. He said to the thin woman, You don't even know where we are bound. Do you think it matters to me? Molly asked. She made the cat sound once more. No chewing the book, Charlie. You have to protect books. They're made from trees and have great knowledge within, knowledge gifted by gods and men. It's a nice story if you stick to it, isn't it? Schmendrick said, We are journeying to King Haggard's country to find the Red Bull. Molly's skin was frightened for a moment, whatever her bones believed or her heart knew, but then the unicorn breathed softly into her cupped hand, and Molly smiled as she closed her fingers on the warmth. Well, you're going the wrong way, she said. The sun was rising as she led them back the way they had come, past Cully, still slumped asleep on his stump, across the clearing and away. The men were returning. Dead branches cracked close at hand, and brush broke with a splashing sound. Once they had to crouch among thorns, while two of Cully's weary rogues limped by, wondering bitterly whether the vision of Robin Hood had been real or not. I smelled them, the first man was saying. Eyes are easy to deceive and cheats by nature, but surely no shadow has a smell. The eyes are perjurers, right enough, grunted the second man, who seemed to be wearing a swamp. But do you truly trust the testimony of your ears, of your nose, of the root of your tongue? Not I, my friend. The universe lies to our senses, and they lie to us, and how can we ourselves be anything but liars? For myself, I trust neither message nor messenger, neither what I am told nor what I see. There may be truth somewhere, but it never gets down to me. Ah, said the first man with a black grin. But you came running with the rest of us to go with Robin Hood, and you hunted for him all night, crying and calling like the rest of us. Why not save yourself the trouble, if you know better? Well, you never know, the other answered thickly, spitting mud. I could be wrong. There was a prince and a princess sitting by a stream in a wooded valley. Their 7 servants had set up a scarlet canopy beneath a tree, and the royal young couple ate a box lunch to the accompaniment of lutes and theorbos? Another word I don't know. I'm learning lots of new words in my old age. Astonishing. I would have read that word before. I have no idea what it is. It's long forgotten my memory. I'll have to find out what it means later. They hardly spoke a word to one another until they had finished the meal, and then the princess sighed and said, "Well, I suppose I'd best get the silly business over with." The prince began to read a magazine. "You might at least," said the princess, but the prince kept on reading. The princess made a sign to two of the servants to begin to play an older music on their lutes. Then she took a few steps on the grass, held up a bridle bright as butter, and called, "Here, unicorn, here, here, my pretty, here to me. Come, 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 come." The prince snickered. "It's not your chickens you're calling, you know," he remarked without looking up. "Why don't you sing something instead of clucking like that?" "Well, I'm doing the best I can," the princess cried. "I've never called one of these things before." But after a little silence, she began to sing. "I am a king's daughter, and if I cared to care, the moon that has no mistress would flutter in my hair. No one dares to cherish what I choose to crave. Never have I hungered that I did not have. I am a king's daughter, and I grow old within the prison of my person, the shackles of my skin. And I would run away and beg from door to door, just to see your shadow once and never more." So she sang and sang again, and then she called, "Nice unicorn, pretty, pretty, pretty," for a little longer. And then she said angrily, "Well, I've done as much as I'll do. I'm going home." The prince yawned and folded his magazine. "You satisfied custom well enough," he told her, "and no one expected more than that. It was just a formality. Now we can be married." "Yes," the princess said, "now we can be married." Kind of how I was proposed to. We can get married now. He needed his permission from his father. This is the kind of ineptitude that I married, my friends. A man who could not make his own mind of his own accord by his own heart and soul. Ah, I'd already proposed to him twice before that. It was some kind of hellish Grimm's fairy tale gone wrong, am I right? Now I yearn for the real fairy tale to begin, of love, light, truth, honour, integrity, and deep, deep passion and romance and devotion to me. Perhaps I'm a little bit like the last unicorn too, old and wizened and cracked and embittered and trying not to be brittle as a peanut brittle, smashing into a million pieces, awaiting the love that never comes, Godot-esque. Ah, but don't worry, people of Earth, we've got Charlie. Hello, Charlie. Do you like he's your mama? I think you're feckin' awesome, mama too. Oh, thank God for you, Charlie. Someone's got to love the mama, innit? I know. Kissy, kissy. Yes, you was a good bird. You was a good bird. Okay, I've got to have these little mad moments just to keep me grounded in reality, you understand. Know thy place in the known cosmos. She's a delightful bird. She's a delightful birdie. You should see her looking up to me with such adoration. Yes, God has blessed my little perfect little baby So perfect, she pulls out her fucking feathers. But we all have our quirks, do we not? We're only bird and human, trapped in our physical incarnations, trying to fly our way home and take the love that was never granted us back with us. You're my gorgeous girl. Where were we when I segued right out of the story? Oh yes, now we can be married. The servants began to pack everything away while the two with the lutes played joyous wedding music. The princess's voice was a little sad and defiant as she said, if there really were such things as unicorns, one would have come to me. I called as sweetly as anyone could, and I had the golden bridle. And of course, I am pure and untouched. For all of me you are, the prince answered indifferently. As I say, you satisfy custom. You don't satisfy my father, but then neither do I. That would take a unicorn. He was tall, and his face was as soft and pleasant as a marshmallow. By inference, that means weak and inept. We need a king to my queen, babies. Never mind. Never mind, my darlings. When they and their retinue were gone, the unicorn came out of the wood, followed by Molly and the magician, and took up her journey again. A long time later, wandering in another country where there were no streams and nothing green, Molly asked her why she had not gone to the princess's song. Schmendrick drew near to listen to the answer, though he stayed on the side of the unicorn. He never walked on Molly's side. The unicorn said, that king's daughter would never have run away to see my shadow. If I had shown myself and she had known me, she would have been more frightened than if she had seen a dragon, for no one makes promises to a dragon. I remember that once it never mattered to me whether or not princesses meant what they sang. I went to them all and laid my head in their laps, and a few of them rode on my back, though most were afraid. But I have no time for them now, princesses or kitchen maids. I have no time. Molly said something strange then, for a woman who never slept a night through without waking many times to see if the unicorn was still there, and whose dreams were all of golden bridles and gentle young thieves. It's the princesses who have no time, she said. The sky spins and drags everything along with it, princesses and magicians and poor Cully and all. But you stand still. You never see anything just once. I wish you could be a princess for a little while, or a flower, or a duck, something that can't wait. She sang a verse of a doleful, limping song, halting after each line as she tried to recall the next. Who has choices need not choose. We must have none. We can love But what we lose, what is gone, is gone. Schmendrick peered over the unicorn's back into Molly's territory. "Where did you hear that song?" he demanded. It was the first he had spoken to her since the dawn when she joined the journey. Molly shook her head. "I don't remember. I've known it a long time." The land had grown leaner day by day as they travelled on, and the faces of the folk they met had grown bitter with the brown grass. But to the unicorn's eyes, Molly was becoming a softer country, full of pools and caves where old flowers came burning out of the ground. Under the dirt and indifference, she appeared only 37 or 38 years old, no older than Schmendrick, surely, despite the magician's birthdayless face. Her rough hair bloomed, her skin quickened, and her voice was nearly as gentle to all things as it was when she spoke to the unicorn. The eyes would never be joyous any more than they could ever turn green or blue, but they too had wakened in the earth. She walked eagerly into King Haggard's realm on bare, blistered feet, and she sang often. Oh, I do like people who sing often. It's one of the most charming things about my daughter and my half-sister, how they love to sing often. And far away on the other side of the unicorn, Schmendrick the magician stalked in silence. His black cloak was sprouting holes coming undone, and so was he. The rain that renewed Molly did not fall on him, and he seemed ever more parched and deserted, like the land itself. The unicorn could not heal him. A touch of her horn could have brought him back from death, but over despair she had no power, nor over magic that had come and gone. So they journeyed together, following the fleeing darkness into a wind that tasted like nails. The rind of the country cracked, and the flesh of it peeled back into gullies and ravines, or shriveled into scabby hills. The sky was so high and pale that it disappeared during the day, and the unicorn sometimes thought that the three of them must look as blind and helpless as slugs in the sunlight, with their log or their damp rock tumbled away. But she was a unicorn still, with a unicorn's way of growing more beautiful in evil times and places. I hear you, sister. Even the breath of the toads that grumbled in the ditches and dead trees stopped when they saw her. Toads would have been more hospitable than the sullen folk of Haggard's country. Their villages laid bald as bones between knife-like hills where nothing grew, and they themselves had hearts unmistakably as sour as boiled beer. Their children stoned strangers into town, and their dogs chased them out again. Several of the dogs never returned, for Schmendrick had developed a quick hand and a taste for mongrel. This infuriated the townsmen as no mere theft would have done. They gave nothing away, and they knew that their enemies were those who did. The unicorn was wary of human beings, watching her companions as they slept, seeing the shadows of their dreams scurry over their faces. She would feel herself bending under the heaviness of knowing their names. Then she would run until morning to ease the ache, swifter than rain, swift as loss, racing to catch up with the time when she had known nothing at all but the sweetness of being herself. Often then, between the rush of one breath and the reach of another, it came to her that Schmendrick and Molly were long dead, and King Haggard as well, and the Red Bull met and mastered so long ago that the grandchildren of the stars that had seen it all happen were withering now, turning to coal. And that she was still the only unicorn left in the world. Then one owlless autumn evening, they rounded a ridge and saw the castle. It crept into the sky from the far side of a long, deep valley, thin and twisted, bristling with thorny turrets, dark and jagged as a giant's grin. Molly laughed outright, but the unicorn shivered, for to her the rooked towers seemed to be groping toward her through the dusk. Beyond the castle, the sea glimmered like iron, Haggard's fortress. Schmendrick murmured, shaking his head in wonderment. Haggard's dire keep. A witch built it for him, they say, but he wouldn't pay her for her work, so she put a curse on the castle. She swore that one day it would sink into the sea with Haggard when his greed caused the sea to overflow. Then she gave a fearful shriek, the way they do, and vanished into a sulphurous puff. Haggard moved in right away. He said no tyrant's castle was complete without a curse. I don't blame him for not paying her, Molly Grew said scornfully. I could jump on that place myself and scatter it like a pile of leaves. Anyway, I hope the witch has something interesting to do while she waits for that curse to come home. The sea is greater than anyone's greed. Yes, it is, my darlings. Never underestimate the sea. Bony birds struggled across the sky, squealing, "Help me! Help me! Help me!" And small black shapes bobbled at the lightless windows of King Haggard's castle. A wet, slow smell found the unicorn. "Where is the bull?" she asked. "Where does Haggard keep the bull?" "No one keeps the Red Bull," the magician replied quietly. "I have heard that he roams at night and lies up by day in a great cavern beneath the castle. We'll know soon enough, but that's not our problem now. The nearer danger lies there." He pointed down into the valley where a few lights had begun to shiver. "That is Hag's Gate," he said. Molly made no answer, but she touched the unicorn with a hand as cold as a cloud. She often put her hands on the unicorn when she was sad or tired or afraid. "This is King Haggard's town," Schmendrick said, "the first one he took when he came over the sea, the one that has lain longest under his hand. It has a wicked name, though none I ever met could say exactly why. No one gets into Hag's Gate, and nothing comes out of it but tales to make children behave. Monsters, werbeasts, witch covens, demons in broad daylight, and the like. But there is something evil in Hag's Gate, I think. Mommy Fortuna would never go there, and once she said that even Haggard was not safe while Hag's Gate stood. There is something there." He peered closely at Molly as he spoke, for it was his one bitter pleasure these days to see her frightened in spite of the white presence of the unicorn. But she answered him quite calmly, with her hands at her sides. "I've heard Hag's Gate called the town that no man knows. Maybe its secret was waiting for a woman to find it out. A woman and a unicorn. But what's to be done with you?" Schmendrick smiled then. "I'm no man," he said. "I'm a magician with no magic, and that's no one at all." The foxfire lights of Hag's Gate grew brighter as the unicorn watched them. But not even a flint flared in King Haggard's castle. It was too dark to see men moving on the walls, but across the valley she could hear the soft boom of armour and the clatter of pikes on stone. Sentinels had met and marched away again. The smell of the Red Bull sported all around the unicorn as she started down the thin, brambly path that led to Hag's Gate. Let me just check on the time, my darlings.